Admiral Tay stood on the command bridge of his massive flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, watching the third planet from this yellow star grow larger on his viewing screen. His dark eyes reflected the blue and green swirls of the world below. After 30 years of conquest across the galaxy, he had seen this same scene hundreds of times before. Another primitive world, another easy victory for the Galactic Empire. The bridge buzzed with quiet activity as his crew prepared for what they all expected to be a routine operation. Officers moved between their stations, checking weapon systems and scanning the planet for any signs of advanced technology. The results were always the same: disappointment for anyone hoping for a real challenge. "Report, Captain Wu," Tay commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never lost a battle. Captain Wu, a younger officer with ambitious eyes, stepped forward holding a data pad. "Sir, the planet calls itself Earth. Population approximately 8 billion. Their technology level is, well, it's almost embarrassing." He shook his head with a slight smile. "They're still using chemical rockets to barely reach their own moon. Their fastest chips would take them thousands of years to reach even their nearest star." Tay nodded slowly. It was exactly what he had expected. The Empire's scouts had identified this world months ago as a potential target, and everything about it screamed easy conquest. The humans down there were so far behind galactic civilization that they probably still thought they were alone in the universe. "What about their weapons?" Tay asked, though he already knew the answer. "Primitive nuclear devices, some directed energy weapons, basic projectile systems," Wu replied, reading from his datapad. "Nothing that could penetrate even our oldest ship's shields. Their most advanced military technology is centuries behind our standard equipment." Around the bridge, other officers chuckled quietly. Lieutenant Jin, the youngest member of the command crew, looked up from his sensor station with an amused expression. "Sir, they don't even have faster-than-light communication. They're probably not even aware we're here yet." Tay walked to the main viewing window, a massive transparent barrier that showed the vast emptiness of space dotted with the lights of his fleet. 200 ships stretched out in perfect formation. Battleships, destroyers, troop carriers, and support vessels. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a continent. Together, they represented the might of an empire that spanned half the galaxy. This was his fleet, his responsibility, his weapon of conquest. The Empire had trusted him with this force because he had never failed them. World after world had fallen before his strategic mind and overwhelming firepower. Some planets surrendered immediately when they saw his ships arrive. Others put up brave but hopeless fights that lasted days or weeks. But the result was always the same: another world added to the Empire's growing collection. "Their orbital installations?" Tay inquired, still gazing out at the blue world. "Basic communication satellites, a few scientific stations, one small space station that looks like it's held together with spare parts," Wu answered. "Nothing that could be considered a threat. They can barely maintain a presence in their own orbit, let alone mount any kind of defense." Tay turned back to face his crew. These were good officers, experienced in conquest, loyal to the Empire. They had served with him through dozens of campaigns, and he trusted their judgment completely. If they said this world was defenseless, then it was defenseless. "Very well," he said, moving to his command chair. "Open a communication channel to the planet, all frequencies. Let's give them the standard ultimatum and get this over with." The communications officer, a veteran named Kang, worked at his station for a moment before looking up. "Channel open, sir. Broadcasting on all known frequencies." Tay straightened in his chair and spoke with the voice of absolute authority that had terrified countless worlds. "Primitive inhabitants of Earth, I am Admiral Tay of the Galactic Empire. Your world has been selected for integration into our domain. You have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally. Lay down your weapons, disband your military forces, and prepare for Imperial administration. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. This is your only warning." He gestured to Kang, who cut the transmission. Around the bridge, the crew began preparing for the usual response: desperate pleas for mercy, frantic attempts at negotiation, or sometimes defiant but empty threats. They had heard it all before from hundreds of worlds, But something unexpected happened. Within minutes, Earth's response came through their communication system. The main screen flickered to life, showing a simple room with a woman sitting calmly at a desk. She appeared to be middle-aged, with black hair and an expression of complete composure. No fear, no desperation, no anger, just calm certainty. "I am Hannah," she said in a clear, steady voice. "Secretary General of the United Earth Government. We have received your message." The bridge fell completely silent. Everyone stared at the screen, waiting for the usual pleading or the impossible, demands for negotiations. Instead, Hannah looked directly into the camera with eyes that held no trace of fear. "You have 24 hours to leave our system. This is your only warning." The transmission ended abruptly. For a long moment, nobody on the bridge spoke. Then nervous laughter began to ripple through the crew. The humans had just threatened them. The primitives had actually issued an ultimatum to the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. But Admiral Tay wasn't laughing. Something about that woman's absolute calm, her complete lack of fear, troubled him deeply. In 30 years of conquest, he had never seen anything quite like it. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, in a reinforced bunker that had been secretly expanded, over the past 50 years, Secretary General Hannah sat in what appeared to be a simple office. The room looked ordinary enough. A wooden desk, a few books on shelves, a small plant in the corner. But behind those plain walls lay the most advanced command center humanity had ever built, connected to defense systems that spanned the entire solar system. Hannah had been preparing for this moment her entire adult life. As a young diplomat, she had been recruited into humanity's most classified project, the one that officially didn't exist. For decades, she had worked alongside the brightest minds on Earth, all united by a single terrifying knowledge. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and the neighbors were not friendly. The transmission equipment before her was far more sophisticated than anything the aliens would expect from a primitive world. Hidden quantum communicators allowed her to speak not just to the approaching fleet, but to resistance movements on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Today's message would reach far beyond Earth. As she settled into her chair, Hannah thought about the countless hours of preparation that had led to this moment. Every word had been carefully chosen, every gesture planned. The aliens expected fear, desperation, or anger. They would get none of those things. She looked directly into the camera, knowing that in minutes her words would be heard by the most powerful military force in the galaxy. More importantly, they would be heard by enslaved worlds that had been waiting generations for hope. "I am Hannah, speaking for Earth," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who held the future of countless worlds in her hands. "You have 24 hours to leave our system. This is your only warning." She reached forward and cut the transmission with the same casual gesture she might use to turn off a light. Aboard the flagship Destroyer of Worlds, the bridge fell into stunned silence. Admiral Tay stared at the blank screen, where moments before the human woman had delivered what could only be described as a threat. In 3 decades of conquest, nothing like this had ever happened. "Did she just—" Captain Wu began, then stopped, unable to finish the sentence. The idea was too absurd to voice. "She threatened us," Lieutenant Jin said, his voice filled with disbelief. "A primitive human just gave us an ultimatum." Around the bridge, nervous laughter began to spread among the crew. Several officers exchanged glances that seemed to say, "Can you believe this?" The communications officer, Kang, was already running diagnostics on his equipment, wondering if perhaps there had been some kind of translation error. "Run the message again," Tay ordered, his voice tight with confusion. The recording played once more. Hannah's calm face filled the screen, delivering her impossible warning with the confidence of someone who held all the cards in a galactic poker game. Captain Wu shook his head and immediately began pulling up tactical displays. "Sir, I'm running a complete scan of their military capabilities again. Maybe we missed something." The holographic displays around the bridge lit up with data about Earth's defenses. Every scan showed the same thing: a world that had barely begun to explore its own solar system, let alone develop weapons that could threaten a galactic empire. Nuclear weapons, yes, but only enough to destroy themselves, Wu reported, reading through the data. Conventional military forces that couldn't fight their way off their own planet. Some basic laser weapons that might be useful against their own aircraft. Lieutenant Jin looked up from his sensor station, confusion clear on his face. Sir, their most advanced spaceship is something they call the International Space Station. It's basically a metal can with solar panels. A single shot from our smallest weapon would vaporize it completely. Then what was that about? Tay demanded, gesturing toward the blank screen. The bridge crew exchanged uncertain looks. In all their years of conquest, they had developed a clear understanding of how these situations worked. Primitive worlds either surrendered immediately, begged for mercy, or made desperate threats they couldn't back up. But this woman had seemed neither desperate nor delusional. She had spoken with the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Maybe it's some kind of cultural thing, suggested Communications Officer Kang. Perhaps in their society they have to issue formal challenges before accepting defeat. Or maybe she's insane, offered another bridge officer. The stress of seeing our fleet might have broken her mind. But Admiral Tay wasn't convinced by any of these explanations. He had built his reputation on reading enemies correctly, understanding their capabilities and motivations. Something about this human woman didn't fit any pattern he had encountered before. "Show me everything we know about her," he ordered. Within minutes, Intelligence Officer Nam had compiled a basic profile. Hana Kim, age 52, elected Secretary General of their United Nations organization 3 years ago. Previous experience as a diplomat and negotiator. No military background. Clean record, well respected by her peers. Family? Tay asked. None. Listed. Appears to be completely dedicated to her political career. Tay studied the information, but it told him nothing useful. On paper, Hana was exactly what she appeared to be. A career diplomat who had risen to lead her world's primary international organization. Nothing in her background suggested she was crazy, delusional, or operating under any kind of misunderstanding about the situation. "Sir," Captain Wu said carefully, "surely you don't think there's any actual threat here? Our scouts have been monitoring this system for months. If they had any kind of advanced weapons, we would have detected them." "Would we?" Tay asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. The crew looked at each other uncertainly. The idea that their advanced sensors might have missed something important was almost as disturbing as the idea that the humans might actually pose a threat. "Run deep scans on everything in this system," Tay ordered. "Every asteroid, every moon, every piece of space debris. I want to know about every grain of dust between here and their outer planets." As his crew scrambled to comply, Admiral Tay continued staring at the blank screen where Hana's face had been. 30 years of experience told him that something was very wrong here. The woman's absolute calm, her complete lack of fear, her impossible confidence, none of it made sense for the leader of a defenseless world facing annihilation. But what troubled him most was a growing feeling that he was missing something important. Something that might change everything. Lieutenant Jin had always prided himself on his sensor skills. During his 10 years of service with Admiral Tay's fleet, he had never missed an important reading or failed to detect hidden threats. His sharp eyes and steady hands had helped conquer dozens of worlds by identifying enemy positions, hidden weapons, and defensive installations before they could pose any danger to the fleet. But as the 24th hour of Earth's impossible deadline ticked closer, Jin found himself staring at his screens with growing confusion and alarm. Something was happening in this solar system, something his instruments were picking up, but his mind was struggling to understand. "Sir," he called out, his voice cutting through the tense quiet of the bridge. "I'm detecting unusual energy signatures throughout the system." Admiral Tay, who had spent the last 23 hours pacing the bridge and reviewing tactical data, immediately moved to Jin's station. The young lieutenant's screens were covered with cascading data streams, energy readings, and orbital tracking information that seemed to be changing by the minute. "Where exactly?" Tay demanded, leaning over Jin's shoulder to study the displays. Jin's hands moved quickly across his controls, highlighting different areas of the solar system on the main tactical display. "It started small, sir. Just minor power fluctuations that I thought might be solar interference, but now..." He paused, zooming in on several locations. Asteroids, moons, what we initially catalogued as abandoned mining stations. They're all showing energy signatures. Captain Wu joined them at the sensor station, his brow furrowed with concern. Over the past day, he had repeatedly assured Admiral Tay that Earth posed no threat, that their scans had revealed nothing but primitive technology. Now he was beginning to wonder if those assurances had been premature. "Show me the installations we identified earlier," Wu ordered. Jin brought up a series of images on his screen, structures scattered throughout the solar system that their initial scans had dismissed as crude mining operations or abandoned research stations. They looked exactly like what you would expect from a species that had barely begun to explore space. Basic metal frameworks, simple solar panels, and primitive communication arrays. "These all looked dead when we first scanned them," Wu said, studying the images carefully. "No significant power signatures, no advanced technology, no signs of active operation." "That's what's strange, sir," Jin replied, his voice growing more uncertain with each word. "They still look the same visually, but my instruments are picking up massive energy flows between them. It's like they're all connected, somehow." Tay felt a cold sensation in his stomach. In 30 years of conquest, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. "Connected how?" Jin worked frantically at his controls, trying to make sense of the data flooding his screens. "I'm not sure, sir. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. It's not traditional electromagnetic radiation or standard power transmission. It's something else entirely." Around the bridge, other officers began to take notice of the conversation. The ship's science officer, Dr. Park, approached the sensor station with her own datapad in hand. "Sir, I've been monitoring subspace fluctuations for the past hour," she reported. "There's definitely something happening throughout this system. The patterns suggest a coordinated network of some kind." "A network of what?" Tay asked, though he was beginning to fear the answer. "Unknown, sir. But whatever it is, it's been dormant. So until now. The energy signatures started appearing exactly 12 hours ago and have been growing stronger ever since." Lieutenant Jin suddenly straightened in his chair, his face pale. "Sir, I'm detecting new activity. The installations aren't just connected, they're powering up." On the main tactical display, dozens of points of light began to appear throughout the solar system. What had seemed like empty space or dead installations now revealed itself to be a vast network of interconnected defensive positions. "Those aren't mining stations," Jin whispered, his voice filled with dawning realization. "They're weapons platforms, all of them. They've been waiting." The bridge fell silent, except for the soft hum of ship systems and the rapid beeping of sensor alerts. Every officer stared at the tactical display, watching as the primitive solar system they thought they understood transformed before their eyes into something completely different. Captain Wu shook his head in disbelief. "But our scans, how did we miss this?" "We didn't miss it," Dr. Park said grimly, studying her readings. "It wasn't there to detect. These systems were completely dormant, powered down to levels that our sensors would read as background radiation. Someone designed them specifically to avoid detection by our technology." Admiral Tay felt the weight of command settling heavily on his shoulders. The easy conquest he had expected was turning into something far more complex and dangerous. But he was still the admiral of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, and he had never retreated from a battle. "How long until the deadline expires?" he asked. Communications Officer Kang checked his chronometer. 7 minutes, sir." Tay looked around his bridge at the faces of officers who had followed him through countless victories. They were brave, experienced warriors who had never known defeat, but he could see uncertainty in their eyes now, the first real doubt they had felt in years of conquest. "All ships to battle stations," he ordered. "Prepare for combat operations." As the fleet moved into attack formation, Jin continued monitoring his sensors. The energy readings throughout the solar system continued to grow stronger, and new signatures appeared with each passing minute. "Sir," Jin called out, his voice tight with tension, "whatever they're doing, it's accelerating. All installations are now showing maximum power output." "Time?" Tay asked. 30 seconds to deadline, sir." Tay stood at the center of his bridge, watching the countdown timer approach 0. Around him, 200 ships of the Imperial fleet prepared to demonstrate their overwhelming superiority to these defiant humans. "Time," Kang announced. "All ships," Tay commanded into his communication system. "Open fire." The response was immediate and utterly devastating. But it wasn't the humans who were devastated. In the space of a heartbeat, the primitive solar system revealed its true nature. Gravity wells opened like wounds in space itself, crushing Imperial ships that had dominated the galaxy for centuries. Weapons that defied every known law of physics reached across impossible distances to tear through armor that had never been penetrated. Lieutenant Jin watched his screens in horror as ship after ship simply disappeared from his sensors, not destroyed, but somehow erased from existence entirely. Earth's patient trap had finally sprung. Admiral Tay watched in absolute horror as his mighty flagship shuddered and groaned under forces that should not have existed. Through the massive viewing windows of the bridge, space itself appeared to be bending and twisting around Earth's defensive platforms. What had looked like primitive mining stations moments before now revealed themselves as weapons of impossible sophistication. The first thing that struck him was the silence. Imperial warships were designed to roar through space with the thunder of massive engines and the crackling discharge of energy weapons. But Earth's defenses made no sound at all. They simply reached out across the vast emptiness and began systematically dismantling the most powerful fleet in the galaxy as if it were made of children's toys. "Damage report," Tay shouted over the groaning of his ship's hull. Lieutenant Jin, his face pale with shock, struggled to make sense of his readings. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than I can track them. The destroyer Iron Fist it's gone." "Not destroyed, sir. Gone. My sensors can't find any debris." Captain Wu gripped his command console as another wave of impossible force washed over their ship. His flagship, the pride of the Imperial Navy, had withstood attacks from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Its shields could deflect planet-killing weapons. Its armor had been forged in the hearts of dying stars. Yet now it was being torn apart by technology that seemed to operate outside the very laws of physics. "How is this possible?" Wu gasped, watching his tactical displays show ship after ship simply vanishing from existence. "Our intelligence reports showed nothing. No advanced technology, no defensive capabilities, nothing." Meanwhile, deep beneath, the Rocky Mountains in North America, Engineer Hyun sat calmly in a control room that looked like something from a science fiction dream. Holographic displays surrounded him on all sides, showing the battle raging in space above. His fingers moved smoothly across controls that seemed to respond to his thoughts as much as his touch. Hyun had devoted 40 years of his life to this moment. As a young graduate student, he had been recruited into humanity's most secret project, one so classified that most world leaders didn't even know it existed. While the rest of humanity lived their normal lives, thinking they were alone, in the universe, Hyun and thousands of others had been preparing for this day. "Gravitational lenses are operating at 98% efficiency," reported his colleague Nari from the station next to him. Her voice was steady and professional, but Hyun could hear the satisfaction underneath. Like him, she had spent decades working toward this moment. "Quantum disruption fields are stable across all platforms," Hyun replied, monitoring the network of defensive installations that spanned the entire solar system. "The enemy fleet is responding exactly as our simulations predicted." Nari smiled, grimly as she watched the alien warships struggle against forces they couldn't understand. 40 years of watching, learning, and preparing. They never suspected a thing. The truth was that humanity had known about the Galactic Empire for over a century. Secret observation posts, hidden far beyond Pluto's orbit, had been monitoring galactic civilization since the early 1900s. Generation after generation of humanity's brightest minds had studied every species the Empire had conquered, analyzing their tactics, their technology, and most importantly, their weaknesses. "Remember the Zeltans?" Hyun asked, pulling up a holographic display showing an insectoid species that had fallen to the Empire 60 years earlier. They tried to fight the Imperial fleet with conventional weapons, lasted 3 days. The Karathi lasted 2 weeks, Nari added, showing another display of a proud warrior race that had been crushed despite their advanced military technology. They had particle beam weapons that could crack moons, but they fought the Empire on the Empire's terms. Yun nodded, watching as another section of the Imperial fleet found itself caught in a gravity well that compressed matter beyond the point of existence. Every species made the same mistake. They tried to match the Empire's technology, tried to build bigger guns and stronger shields. They never thought to change the rules of the game entirely. The human approach had been radically different. Instead of trying to build weapons that could match Imperial technology, they had focused on developing systems that operated on completely different principles. Gravitational manipulation, quantum field disruption, and dimensional folding. Technologies that the Empire's sensors couldn't detect because they didn't recognize them as weapons at all. Phase 2 is ready for implementation, Nari reported, her hands hovering over a new set of controls. Not yet, Hyun replied, studying the tactical situation. Let them think they understand what's happening. The real surprise comes later. Back. On the Imperial flagship, Admiral Tay was beginning to realize the magnitude of his miscalculation. This wasn't just a defensive system that had been hidden from his sensors. This was technology that operated on principles his civilization didn't. I even understand, sir, Communications Officer Kang called out, his voice shaking. I'm receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Multiple star systems are reporting simultaneous uprisings. The resistance movements are activating everywhere at once. Tay felt the blood drain from his face. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about Earth defending itself. This was a coordinated galactic revolution, timed to coincide with his fleet's arrival. They've been planning this for decades, he whispered, finally understanding the scope of what humanity had accomplished. The humans weren't just preparing to defend their world, they were preparing to liberate the entire galaxy. Dr. Park looked up from her science station, her face filled with awe and terror. Sir, I'm analyzing their weapon signatures. This technology is at least 1,000 years beyond anything in our databases. They haven't just been hiding their capabilities, they've been developing completely new branches of science. Lieutenant, Jin's voice cracked as he delivered his next report. Sir, we've lost 60% of the fleet. The remaining ships are requesting permission to retreat. Admiral Tay stood in the center of his crumbling bridge, watching his life's work disappear before his eyes. The empire he had served so faithfully, the fleet he had led to countless victories, the reputation he had built over 3 decades, all of it was dissolving like smoke in the wind. But what truly amazed him was the elegance of humanity's strategy. They had allowed themselves to appear weak and primitive while secretly developing the most advanced technology in the galaxy. They had studied their enemies for generations, learning every weakness and vulnerability, and when the moment came, they had struck with surgical precision that turned the Empire's greatest strength, its vast military might, into its greatest weakness. The humans had just rewritten the rules of galactic warfare, and the Empire was learning the new rules the hard way. Admiral Tay sat in his command chair, watching the remains of his once mighty fleet scatter like leaves in a cosmic storm. The flagship Destroyer of Worlds, the ship that had brought terror to 100 systems, now drifted powerless through space, its engines dead and its weapon systems completely offline. Around him, the bridge crew worked frantically to restore, even basic life support, their faces pale with the shock of absolute defeat. In just 4 hours, the most powerful military force in the galaxy had been reduced to scattered debris and fleeing survivors. Ships that had taken decades to build and had never known defeat were now nothing more than twisted metal floating in the void. The Empire's invincible reputation lay in ruins, destroyed by a species they had dismissed as primitive savages. Sir, Communications Officer Kang called out, his voice hoarse from shouting damage reports. I'm receiving a transmission from Earth. It's broadcasting on all Imperial frequencies simultaneously. Tay looked up sharply. That's impossible. Our communication codes are classified at the highest levels. No one outside the Empire should even know they exist. Sir, they're not just using our codes, Kang replied, his hands shaking as he worked his controls. They're overriding our entire network. Every ship, every base, every planet in the Empire is receiving this message. The main screen flickered to life, showing Secretary General Hana once again. But this time, she wasn't speaking only to Tay's fleet. This time her words were reaching every corner of the galaxy where the Empire held power. "Citizens of the galaxy," Hana began, her voice carrying the same calm authority that had delivered Earth's warning. "For too long, you have lived under the boot of tyranny. For too long, your worlds have served the Empire's greed while your people suffered in silence. Today, that ends." Tay felt his heart sink as he realized the true scope of what humanity had accomplished. This wasn't just about defending one world from conquest. This was about something far grander and more terrifying. "The signal has been given," Hana continued, her image broadcasting to billions of enslaved beings across thousands of worlds. "Rise up. Your liberation begins now." Within minutes of Hana's broadcast, Tay's communication systems lit up with reports from across the Empire. Intelligence Officer Nam worked frantically to process the flood of incoming messages, his face growing more ashen with each new report. "Sir, we are receiving emergency transmissions from the Centauri sector," Nam reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "The colonial government has been overthrown. The resistance fighters are using advanced weapons we've never seen before. The Vegan system is in revolt," added another officer. "Imperial forces are requesting immediate reinforcement. Beta Reticuli, Wolf 359, Epsilon Eridani, uprising reports from everywhere," Nam continued, the messages coming so fast he could barely keep up. "Sir, it's like they all coordinated this moment perfectly." Tay closed his eyes, finally understanding the magnitude of humanity's patience and planning. While his scouts had been watching Earth for months, humanity had been watching the Empire for generations. They hadn't just been preparing to defend their own world, they had been quietly organizing the liberation of every enslaved species in the galaxy. On Earth, in the hidden command center beneath the Swiss Alps, Engineer Hyun monitored the cascade of rebellions spreading across known space. Holographic displays showed star system after star system lighting up with the symbols of freedom, as resistance movements activated according to carefully laid plans. "The Altarians just captured their orbital defense platforms," reported Dr. Lee from her monitoring station. "They're using the gravity disruptors we provided them 15 years ago." "Kepler 442b is free," added Specialist Cho. "The Zephyrian resistance successfully disabled the Imperial garrison using our quantum scramblers." Nari looked up from her own console, a smile spreading across her face. "Sir, we're receiving confirmation from over 300 worlds. The technology transfers we've been making for the past 50 years are paying off perfectly." Hyun nodded with satisfaction. The human strategy had been built on a simple but revolutionary idea. Instead of conquering the galaxy themselves, they would give other species the tools they needed to free themselves. For decades, hidden human ships had made contact with resistance movements across the Empire, providing advanced technology and coordinating plans for this moment. "How long have we been planning this?" asked a young technician who was witnessing the scope of the operation for the first time. "My grandfather helped design the first generation of these systems," Hyun replied. "We've been preparing for over a century, ever since we first detected Imperial ships in our outer system." Back on the crippled Imperial flagship, Admiral Tay watched his life's work crumble in real time. The empire he had served so faithfully was dissolving like a sandcastle in the tide. World after world declared independence, their populations finally free to throw off the chains of imperial rule. "Sir," Lieutenant Jin reported quietly, "long-range sensors show massive fleet movements throughout the Empire. Ships are abandoning their posts, retreating to defensive positions around the core worlds." "They're not retreating," Tay realized with growing horror. "They're being driven back. The humans didn't just give these worlds weapons. They gave them the coordination to act as one." Secretary General Hana's voice filled the bridge once more as her final message reached them. "Admiral Tay," she said, looking directly into the camera as if she could see him across the vast distance. "We gave you one warning. You should have listened." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Around Tay, his officers struggled to comprehend what had just happened. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years was collapsing, not through conquest by a superior force, but through the coordinated uprising of every people they had ever oppressed. Dr. Park, the ship's science officer, looked up from her instruments with wonder in her eyes. "Sir, I'm detecting massive technological signatures from the freed worlds. They're not just using human weapons, they're already beginning to share technology with each other." Tay finally understood. Humanity hadn't just planned to defeat the Empire, they had planned what would come after. Instead of replacing one galactic tyranny with another, they had created the foundation for something unprecedented. A galaxy where free peoples could work together as equals. The age of imperial conquest was over. The age of human guidance, patient, generous, and wise, had begun. And unlike every empire before it, this new order was built not on the subjugation of the weak, but on the liberation of all. In the end, humanity's greatest weapon hadn't been their advanced technology or their careful planning. It had been their understanding that true strength came not from ruling others, but from helping others rule themselves. The galaxy would never be the same.